Hello, everybody. Welcome to another adventure in From Adversity to Awakening. I'm your host, Peggy O'Neill, and I have a very special guest with us today. This is Jessenia, and Jessenia, you'll have to pronounce your last name because I forgot to ask you before we started, and I don't want to mess it up.
Jessenia Nozzolillo.
Nahalalo. Is that right?
Jessenia is perfectly fine.
Okay, good. I don't know anyone else named Jessica. Jessenia, so you could be like Oprah or Elvis, I suppose. Right. The first name is the share, those people. Yeah. So thank you for coming. And Jessenia is I'm new friends with Jessenia. I only know a little bit about her story and her life, but I know she's had many, many hardships. She's also the mother of not one, not two, not three, not four, but six children. And hi, Jessenia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to see what we'll get into today.
I am very excited about that. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Jessenia. She's a multidimensional spiritual coach and teacher with the ability to see your Akashic records. Akashic records house all past lives, your life plan before incarnation, past, present, and future of this life. This allows Jessenia the profound capacity to guide you through some of your most aggressive subconscious blocks for the best possible outcome in this life. Well, that is quite a phenomenal capacity, and what an amazing gift you are to the planet and to people who can appreciate how that information could really skyrocket their progress and help them through their adversity. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the biggest challenges that you've had in your life? And
I kind of came in a very challenging world and dynamic, and I know now why I came in that way. I do feel like I've, heavyweight championship of trauma over here, just so one day I would have the tools to help other people manage the same thing. One of my belief systems has always been like nobody wants to get advice from someone who hasn't been to their depths or their darkness, right? So as a healer, like how can we heal if we haven't reached the depth ourselves somewhere along the line? I was born into a very abusive family. I mean, it starts, there's a lot of generational trauma. My grandparents were pedophiles. They were very abusive and controlling. My mother immediately, as soon as she could, rushed into the first relationship she could find, which was
to get
a
out.
drug addict abuser who tried to kill her and us a couple different times. And so we were in this world of kind of chaos very, very early on. I learned, and I suffered a lot throughout that journey. There's lots of different types of abuse that I've had to unravel: mental, emotional, sexual, physical, poverty, homelessness. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of re-identifying myself and rebuilding myself out of something like that.
Wow.
So we like we said, heavyweight championships. We had a lot of experience in a lot of different realms of abuse that really prepared me for what I do today, every day, right? And now I'm clearing past life abuse. I'm clearing past life traumas, not just this life, but the multi-dimensional experience. So,
and did you mean for yourself or for others or both?
Everybody, right? That's what I do now. So,
right.
But it started with clearing trauma in this life. That's how my gifts started unraveling.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. It's so funny because, you've told me that story some time ago. And when I saw you today on the screen, you're just so bright and so present and so peaceful within, from my perspective, that whole traumatic past completely slipped my mind. I feel a little bit sorry that I had forgotten. I won't forget again, but what a very, very challenging, difficult. And now you're having a thriving family and you're having a thriving business and a thriving.
I think it's beautiful you forgot because I'm not wearing it anymore,
Yes,
right? I'm not
exactly.
wearing that pain or suffering anymore, and I think that that's really important. And
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
the most beautiful things I learned during my healing process was that, trauma allows us deeper depths of love.
yes.
Because if we have this gaping wound, the only thing powerful enough to heal that is coming back into a place of love, right? A place of compassion. So, my capacity to love, my capacity to be compassionate, my capacity to hold space for people has expanded far beyond anything I could ever imagine because I have healed this stuff. I am not just I'm not struggling with it anymore. It's not weighing on me. It's not a part of my identity. In fact, it's a there's a quote that I love, and it's that if you're going to talk about my past, then talk about it in front of me so I could tell you how I, accomplished some of the greatest things of my life. Because now it's this story of how I grew. It's a reclamation of my power, right? Of deeper levels of love, of deeper forms of identity. And I love that I'm not wearing the pain anymore. I love that
Yeah.
when people look at me, they assume that I've had this perfect life and I was, you know, spiritual things very early on. And, I was meditating at 3, and that's the only reason I'm so gifted. I love that assumption because it means that I've done the work to create that reality. And that's really hard to do. I'm proud of that accomplishment.
It's beautiful. I mean, recently, I mean, I'm in tears hearing that because I relate to it so well myself. And knowing that when I started meditating as a teenager, but it wasn't until my mid 30s that I started really to work on the deep stuff and deal with the trauma of my life and how much my heart has let go of the armoring and the tar and the cement and like all the stuff that was around it, and that my heart is open now and I can enjoy I can feel awe at just looking at a flower. I can, I'm transported to bliss, so easily now. So that's so beautiful. And I also was relating that two times in the last week, two different people told me something that I had never heard before, which is they said, "Oh, people discriminate against little people." And I was like, "Seriously? You
Mm.
you don't realize that I've been pointed and laughed at my whole life? I never been able to get a date with, in my normal world my whole life. Like that's some serious ouch." I mean, there's a long list, but those are two of the biggest ones. So that was really interesting to me. And so it made when you said, "I'm glad that I'm not showing it anymore." I mean, maybe that's what's happening for me too. I hope so. That's a beautiful thing. So
Yeah.
everybody could, listen to how people receive them and see. Are
Well,
you wearing
listen
your
to that though. So the judgments we project are judgments we believe in, right? So
Mhm.
these people are telling you, I don't believe there's any reason to discriminate because I wasn't raised that way and I don't have that type of
Right.
judgment that I
They
carry. And
they
that's
definitely were
beautiful in
telling me
itself.
they were
Know
telling
that
me that
there are, if
yeah.
we there's one of my favorite moments is I grew up in Massachusetts, New England, freezing all the time. I swear we have like this Arctic wind that even when it's 70 degrees out, it feels 30. It's wild. So it was the dead of winter. I was running errands. I was really frustrated. I was freezing cold. I couldn't find my keys. I was like fumbling by the car. The kids are yelling at me. I got to get everybody in the car. And Spirit says, calm down, turn around. And I was like, why? Is somebody going to like burglarize me? So I turn around and suddenly like the sun hits my face and it
Mm,
warms my body and I get
mhm.
calm and suddenly I'm relaxed and I find my keys and I open the door and everybody's calm and everything's beautiful suddenly. All I did was shift. My back was to the sun. I couldn't feel it. I was freezing. I couldn't focus. And it just transformed my reality that like I could just look a different direction and suddenly I was living a whole different reality. And I think for you, it's almost like this reminder that if you look for it, there are people who love you and appreciate you. If you're open for it, they show up.
Yes, I
And
do.
suddenly like they don't even know what that means to have to be critical about people of different sizes because they weren't taught that hatred. They weren't taught that baloney, right? And they're saying, if you look enough, we're here and we're here for you. And that's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And a lot of my friends may have grown up with some of that, but like you and me, they've dealt with
Right.
opening their heart, and they the judgmental side has dissolved. And so yeah, and I've always been very blessed with lots of friends. So yeah.
Wonderful.
So tell us, how did it impact you in your life when you had, like, you said you were homeless. I mean, like, what was your life like when coming out of all of coming from a home like that?
Um, there's I think that one of the biggest takeaways, I remember being about 5, and I remember it was about 5 because it was right before my birthday, and we were trying to, like, there's always questions about, like, what do you want for your birthday? And I never liked my birthdays. And I remember having this whole conversation and contemplation that like my mother was talking about how I'd always been a very compassionate, sensitive person, and I just never wanted anything. And it was interesting because I was hearing her talk about me as compassionate, never wanting anything, not materialistic, and being so thoughtful. But in the reality was, I didn't even want to be on earth. I wanted to leave. So I just was so upset and miserable and hurt by the experience that I contemplated suicide around 5. And I think that um that's hard, right? That's a difficult reality. So
Yeah.
my connection to the world was very detached. I couldn't understand suffering. I lost faith. I couldn't understand how any type of, my grandparents were very, very religious, and also some of my abusers, right? So I couldn't understand how people preach love and preach kindness and preach you know righteousness through this religion, but also sexually abuse and violate the most innocent of our world. And it was a really difficult challenge. And a lot of that was distrust, right? I started
Yeah.
questioning love. I started questioning people. I didn't have people I could trust. I didn't have people that understood me at all. And I didn't want to be here. So a lot of my life was in disassociation. It was disconnection. And none of that changed until I found out I was pregnant as a teenager. So I was a pregnant teen. I had to, I graduated high school while working full time with my 2-month-old at my graduation. And that actually woke me up because it wasn't about me anymore. I didn't want to be here, but now I had this terrible responsibility that weighed on me really heavily to be a good mother for her. So
Using coping mechanisms like drugs and alcohol, or
I was, yes, I was very lost. I mean, I was raised by addicts.
uh-huh.
So we have a big pattern of addiction in our family, and yes, it was very easy to use substances as a form of escape. And I did a lot of risky things. I didn't value my life. So it's almost like I was waiting for something to take me, right?
Yeah.
And I do
It's
think
almost
that
kind of like they call that a death wish, right? Like,
yes, like
yeah.
I didn't fear for my life. I would do things. I had no fear. So I remember, but there was one thing about that though that really struck with me is I wouldn't try addictive things. I just refused to because of the pattern of addiction and the violence of my childhood. I refused to let myself get there.
Right,
And
right.
I would not use things that I felt I was getting addicted to. So if I felt like there was anything habitual happening, I would walk away from it. And it wasn't because I cared for my life. It was because I feared being an addict more than I feared death,
That
because I
is such
saw
a
how that changed people.
what a blessing that you could had enough wisdom, probably, that you could see that it was the alcohol that was, and all of this that was making it difficult for these people to be congruent between what they said and what they did, which was
Right.
sound.
So, I mean, I learned a lot through that. And it's that people are exactly who they prove to be, especially in difficult circumstances or under the influence. And I think that we, as sober people of, people struggling with addiction or abuse or substances, make excuses. And then therefore that enables the behavior. We think, oh, that's not really who they are. They're drunk, or they're inebriated, or they're under the influence. But the reality is they are that person. That is the subconscious. That is the shadow. That is the piece that needs the healing. And if we keep making excuses, they never actually address that, right? The consequences of that, or who they are when they're under the influence. So
Right.
I learned that very early on. Like I said, my whole life was a school for all of the trauma repair and lessons I would learn later on. But I was thankful for that, because when I found out I was pregnant, I
Yeah,
went
I was
into
just going to ask you about that.
sobriety.
Bringing
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So, I mean, I was fully sober. That's when I decided I just never touched anything after that. And I just wanted to be the best mom possible. That was my only goal. And I was, like I said, she was 2 months old at my high school graduation. And I took care of her like nobody else took care of her. I raised her. I ended up being a single mother because we were kids, we were teenagers, and it takes a lot of work and effort to do that. And I went to college for psychology. So I was so invested in my healing that I wanted to learn everything about my mind and how it works and how to be a better person. And that's when my life really started kind of, that's when life started changing for me. So something that, and it's really fascinating because I had a lot of people reach out in high school and say, like, how courageous of you to keep the child, and like, I can't believe you're doing that, and like, I had all these abortions, and there was a lot of shame that surfaced, through my family, through my raising, through our culture, through just society. There was a lot of shame that surfaced and a lot of projections I carried. And after all these people came to me, I realized that there's nothing shameful about keeping my child. I'm courageous. I'm the only, it takes
Totally.
great courage to say that this life is more important than my shame or my humiliation, and to do it anyway. So I started just
And such
wearing
great
that
love, and such
as a
great love
badge.
to to recognize that you're going to become responsible for another person and say, okay, I got to get it together, right? Like, what great love that is.
Right. Life mattered now. So I wanted to make the most of that experience. And that's when I really began my healing journey. So it was definitely life changing, but it gave me purpose, and it gave me direction, and it made me want to stay. So I had to figure it out, and I figured it out.
That is so awesome. So tell us about how did you, as you went through your process and healing and transforming and all of that, changing and becoming, your well-being growing, hopefully little bit, right? How did you have a sense of greater connection to yourself or to, you said you had lost your faith. I mean, did it change that at all?
I have always been super curious. Even as a child, it was almost so here's the thing. I didn't even know I had gifts until I was about 27 years old. I had no idea. They were always there though. So I now have the ability to look back at a lot of my characteristics and just things that people called, behavior patterns, and realize, like, oh, I always had these gifts. But I had no idea until I was 27. And part of that shattering experience was I went to a haunted house. And at the haunted house, I could hear and see and communicate with spirit, and they were telling me things that nobody else could confirm, or nobody else knew, and I definitely didn't
Like a
know.
real, like a real haunted house, or like a Halloween make believe?
No, Lizzie Borden's house. Lizzie Borden, the saying, she gave her mother 40 whacks when she saw what she had done. She gave her father 41. So I stayed there. I went there. A friend, it was on their bucket list. They wanted to go. I was such a skeptic of the spiritual
This
community.
is a
I didn't
riot. Oh
care
my
about it.
gosh.
I had not dived into it at all. I just didn't really care about it. My mom was very spiritual and curious. I grew up in a very religious family. We were told that psychics and mediums were, wrong and against religion. So I went for my friend, and went for that experience. It was a
Huh.
gift, and it was on their bucket list. And so I had this shocking reality where I was hearing them and seeing them and everybody else. And, I was sitting there and I was having this conversation, and the difference, I think, was the tour guide was confirming everything. And by the end of the night, I was like, shaken up, like, how am I seeing all this stuff and hearing all this stuff so clearly? And then it ended up with the question of, how long have you been doing this? You have more information than a lot of our professionals who've run episodes on the house. And I just, today, this is the first time I didn't even know I could do this. And they were shocked. They said, what do you mean today? This is the first time you've ever connected? And I was like, intentionally? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. And I remember going out to my car, really shaken up, really, really flustered and shaken up, and kind of like my world had been shattered. And I called my mom, like we all do when we're freaking out. And I was explaining it to her, and she was like, I've been telling you you're special your whole life. What do you mean you didn't know? And I was like, I thought you meant dumb. I thought you meant like special, like, like I'm slow. And she was like, oh my God,
That's
Jessenia,
hilarious.
like, no, you've always had this. And I was like, what do you mean? So I realized that, one of my strongest and first gifts was telepathy and connection to spirit. And I had a million conversations with spirit as a child, but I thought that everybody could. And I thought that it was my imagination. So like everybody could play into their imagination and get guidance and have conversations and create, imaginative visuals in their minds, and that it was not connected to reality at all. So the difference was I had bridged what I thought was imagination to reality. And that's what shook my reality, right? I realized, like, holy shit, you're right. I've always been doing this. I just didn't realize it was real. I thought it was pretend.
Yeah.
So in a lot of the reason I was a skeptic, I then realized, was because I was getting way more information than a lot of these like readers or shows that I was watching online. So then there was this mission to figure it out, to master it, to understand it better, to learn about it in whatever way I could.
Yeah, I
But
like master it. Like you
yeah,
have the skill, so let's turn it into mastery, right?
right, right. And you know what spirit said? And a lot of things started to make sense. It was like I had finally met myself. And then everything else started making sense. The lack of self-esteem, the curiosity, the hearing things, the being uncomfortable in crowds, the having social anxiety, the having panic and paranoia every time I went into a city, feeling people's emotions, feeling people's wounds, seeing dead people. Like it all started to make sense. All the things that I thought were insecurities or burdens or pains like started to kind of click, and so that created almost like an obsession. It was like I need to know more of this.
Of course.
I need to
Can,
understand
can
that better.
can I interrupt you for a second? A moment ago, you said it's like I came to know myself. So that sort of stuck out to me. It's like what is it? Could you explain what that meant to come to know
Yes.
yourself?
I always say that my greatest gift.
I think it was more than seeing that you had these skills.
Right, right. It was more like, so I would say like my greatest gift is I introduce people back to who they are, really who they are,
Yeah,
right? So my whole life was incredibly traumatic. I was an extreme people pleaser. I was naturally sacrificial. I didn't know how to take space. I was afraid of attention. I was afraid of my body. I was afraid of connection. I was afraid of everything, right?
yeah,
So I wasn't living for me. I didn't even have an identity. My identity was fear. My identity was survival.
right.
So once I understood that there was something greater,
Yeah,
something beyond that,
yeah,
I finally could attach to an identity outside of trauma, outside of the wound, outside of the victim.
yes,
And then I finally got to meet those versions of, or reclaim those
yes,
versions of myself through
yes,
this healing journey. Like
yes,
spirit has taught me how to heal myself.
yes,
Spirit was the first reflection of love. Spirit was my guide. Spirit was always there for me. But there was a sudden realization. But I
yes.
didn't know that until I recognized that polarity, that difference.
Beautiful. When I hear that, it's like in my mind, it's sort of coming up simplified. Like when the trauma was the predominant part of your life, you were just trying to connect on the outside, trying to find love on the outside, pleasing and uh, being empathetic and all this stuff. And then once you had this meeting with yourself, to me, it's sort of like a transition into recognizing that the love was coming from inside, that it was who you are. So
Yeah.
is it
What spirit told me that I thought was it's a really great frame of mind to carry. And it's that trauma is any program or memory where we were convinced we weren't lovable. And the healing journey is reclaiming that as
beautiful?
misinformation and being lovable anyway, because that's what we were gifted. That's how we were born.
Yes.
And that's been part of that journey, is kind of like, again, reclaiming those little pieces along the way.
Yes. 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 I mean, I think that and that is the meeting of yourself, is when you have that recognition that I am lovable. Love is inside of me. In fact, I am love, and I've never been separate from it. And for me, this has been the gift that's come out of, dealing with the difficulties in my life, and I'm finding that so many others are having it too. And I'm sure me, like you, when I guide people, whether it's the feeling of unworthiness or the feeling of not enoughness or fear of annihilation, really underneath all of that is when they come to a sense of I am lovable, that like that whole package just seems to like dissolve, right? Yeah. So how did it change your life, Jasenia, when you met yourself?
Well, I mean, it was nothing has literally ever been the same.
Oh,
It's been a wild experience. Um I think that meeting yourself requires great responsibility, right? Like, Spirit says to me all the time that our greatest gift is first our greatest burden. But once you tap into that gift,
say that
we're
again. Our greatest gift is
our greatest gift is first our greatest burden,
yes.
right? We have this hypersensitivity to feel everybody's emotion and hear everybody's thoughts, and work with people on this energetic level or plane, and people don't understand how painful that can be sometimes, how
Right.
overwhelming that is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for most of my life it had controlled me. It
Mm.
had really taken over, and I just thought I was weird. I just thought I was strange. I would go into like social anxiety paralysis, where I'd go into buildings and completely disassociate and like would freeze up and couldn't even walk. I didn't even know what happened. I just like come back to consciousness somewhere else because somebody had to move me. It
Wow.
was really, really painful way to live.
Yeah.
In understanding my gift, I started realizing like what I could control this. I could do something with this. This is in my power, and it actually
Right.
is a superpower. I would say everybody wants gifts, but nobody wants the side effects of them. They have no idea what they're asking for, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I have always been super sensitive, and unfortunately that looked very different when I was younger. And now I have this amazing, superpower that people admire, but it took so much work and effort to train it, to understand it, to use it appropriately, and to master that kind of world. And I think that that's really been the difference, is like on the journey to self mastery. And I always explain this to people. I would say, like, the best thing you can do for your magic, for your power, is heal. Because healing, that's when it all started unraveling, right? The healing opens the channel. If I am someone who I am, if I'm someone who's suffered with great childhood trauma or any trauma at all, I'm going to be very easily triggered. I'm going to be very easily disrupted. I give away my power very frequently in reaction, right? I may judge, I may feel insecure, I may even run away from love and opportunity because I just don't believe I'm worthy of it. I sabotage success, I sabotage money. I may even start drama and look for problems because the wound taught me that. The wound and love and spirit don't speak on the same realm. So, in
Yeah.
order to be a clearer channel to spirit, we do what? We elevate or transcend that energy and clear that pathway. This world is very dense. Our emotional body is very dense. Until we make peace with that and heal that, we can't hear or listen to that beautiful inner voice, that, supportive message and guidance or intuition or our spirit guides. So, and I believe everybody has gifts. I truly, fully do. A lot of what I do is introducing people, like I said, to themselves, their power, their abilities, their gifts, and I help them train those. So I haven't found anybody who wasn't magical. But I think the secret is that we don't always know how to heal enough to get there. That
Yeah.
we don't always know how to listen, that we don't always know how to control that beast or that gift and
Yeah.
use it for ourselves in a beneficial way versus letting it overwhelm us or control us or cause havoc through these negative side effects. So it's been a really interesting journey since then, but I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I love the experience. I'm very, very proud of the work I've done. I'm very proud of the person I've become. And I think that was a very transformational moment in my past where spirit actually had me go back and review certain things and see the lesson in them. And when I got down to it, I was just in tears, and it was tears of gratitude that I love the person I have become despite
Right.
the adversity. I love the wisdom. I love the compassion. I love the depth I can reach with people. I love that I can hold that type of space for people. And what it came down to is like, I would choose that all again to be the person I am today because I value that person so much. And I think that was really a big part of my, a big point of my healing. Like my little inner award ceremony, celebrate. I really took the time to celebrate myself that day because of what they showed me. And it was just so beautiful.
That's so beautiful that you could I mean, I asked you what transformed, and it sounds like what transformed was seeing your life as a hardship as opposed to seeing your life as a total blessing. And when you see your life and yourself as a total blessing, then you have this whole other life, you coming from a whole different identity, right? So
Right.
the basis of everything that you do is
What
completely
didn't
different.
transform? Everything
Right,
transformed.
right,
Everything.
I can relate to
Nothing has
that
ever been the
totally,
same.
yeah. And how about the level how about the sense of joy? How did you experience, a shift in the level of joy in your life as you went through the healing and transformation?
Yes. And I find a lot of I do this with my children. I've learned this through my children. I didn't have a childhood, is what I noticed. So I didn't have time for joy. There was very little joy growing up. And what I've come to experience is that, my children taught me to play. My children taught me to be present. My children taught me to enjoy the moment, to have fun, to splash, to play. And as I healed, I got more into that authentic like expression and place of being, and they really do keep me grounded and rooted. They really do keep me here. They really do keep me present. So I feel like they've taught me more joy than anything, but they've also been my biggest healing markers, like we said, even with my first being my point of transformation. So I couldn't imagine. I went from zero joy to everything is beautiful, everything has purpose, everything has value, everyone is important.
And what a joy that is to like live life from that place where everything is a joy, everybody's important. I mean, that alone, I mean, I was surprised that you said that word at the end because I thought you were going to say beautiful, but important is like if it's important, then it has value for you and
Mhm.
value uplifts you. And so it's so lovely to hear the story of how your children have helped you to become lighthearted and to learn about that other pole of life, which is joy and enjoyment and pleasure and fun and frivolity, whatever that word is, and splashing around in the water. So that's so beautiful. Um, do you have any other things that you could share with our audience that might be helpful in helping them to make this transition through their adversity? I mean,
I think that
you've already said a zillion amazing things.
no, I think that one of the most fascinating things people struggle to understand, and I've seen this through life planning in the Akashic realm, and it's that um, we have this thing called soul family, right? Soulmates and soul family, and in the Akashic realm, that is by definition a person you have incarnated with 30 or more lives, and in that same definition says they can play a friend, they can play a support system, and sometimes also play your challenger, your oppressor, your
Interesting.
and if we think about it this way, if I want to master martial arts, I'm not going to pick a weak opponent, right? I'm going to pick someone who's going to push me to my edge because I want to be the strongest, best version of me.
Right.
And they sign up for that with love. And I think that that's so fascinating because I couldn't imagine a place or a time where I was talking about, my rapist, my abuser, my challenger, and be thankful for the lessons they taught me and be thankful for the courage it took to play that role. Because I have so much love and compassion in my life and so much opportunity available to me because I was able to grow from that adversity, grow from that challenge, grow from that experience. And to play the oppressor, to take on that responsibility, whether it's karmic, whether it's whatever, um, I believe is so much more challenging. because there is no opportunity. There's that loop, that suffering, that extreme that they live in constantly. And I can see that with so much compassion now and so much gratitude
Yeah.
that they had the courage to play that for me, but also I had the strength to grow from that and to leave and to
Yeah.
correct that behavior for myself.
Yeah. So in my book, Walking Tall, subtitle is Overcoming Inner Smallness, No Matter What Size You Are. I talk about inner smallness, which is the victim side, and the inner bigness, which is this courageous, adventurous, curious, open, determined person that can, that wants to be the best that they can be. So when you were saying the thing that you actually have a sense of appreciation and gratitude for your abuser, for me, is the ultimate inner bigness. I mean, it means that your heart is so big and you have so much wisdom that you can actually see that you couldn't have gotten to where you are without that piece of the puzzle. And that even though it was awful and hurtful and your life sucked for a really long time, it was really, really dark and awful, and you want to leave the planet, like that's a serious place for a 5-year-old to be, that you could appreciate that person's role and have gratitude for that person, not just the role, but also the person. So I just want to, really my heart bows down to that. So it's so beautiful. And I think it's a beautiful testimony to what happens when we truly heal. That,
And I don't condone abuse at all. And I want to point this out. And
yeah,
when
I
this
wasn't
is
getting
how I
that.
learned this lesson. Yeah, I love this for everybody. So I wanted to add to that a little bit. And one of the illusions we shatter when we're working on healing is this illusion of wrong or right. Right. And I was very righteous as a child. I wanted to believe in this like vindictive wrong or right, that there was an absolute wrong and an absolute right. And
That's how the
I
people
really
around you were
stuck with
show.
that.
Wasn't that how the
Right.
people around you were
Right.
modeling?
A lot of us are raised that way. So spirit had said, what if there is no wrong or right? And I thought, I don't understand that. That's not how I think. And they said, here's an example. A woman steals. Wrong, correct? Yes, wrong. Okay, great. Now, what if we find out the woman steals because she lives in an oppressive government where they're strategically starving her children, and that last meal will save their lives enough for her to make a plan? Is she wrong? And they said the only thing that changed was your ability to understand the problem and be more compassionate. They said, so instead of leaping to right or wrong, pick compassion and understand the problem. And one of the most transformative things I have understood in my healing is that there really is no such thing as villain, that these people who are suffering have a story, that they have a pattern, that they have also suffered. And sexual abuse or pedophilia is one of them. You know, in uncovering my own healing, I understood my grandparents were completely abused and taught pedophilia, and their parents abused them and their parents abused them, and there was this vicious pattern. And it wasn't even about being mad at them anymore. It was about understanding that they were also victims, and if I wasn't courageous enough to release myself from that victim pattern, my children would also be victims. So it had
And
to take
another
the
another
pressure off of that.
another example of your extraordinary, and I mean it, really extraordinary inner bigness, to see the pattern and to say it stops here. I am not
Without blame, just
right.
compassion.
Yeah,
Just
and
compassion.
just like, and knowing that this is what you need to do, that's the right thing for you, right?
Right. And I could be mad at them, but I'd still be stuck at step one, which is just
Exactly.
acknowledging the pattern, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
acknowledging the wound, right? So that's just the beginning of the journey. We have to go deeper.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, it makes me have the question, what do you think put the spark in you to be so wise to to have these understandings?
Spirit, you know, I give all my credit to
The
spirit. I
connection to spirit. Yeah.
when I was struggling and suffering and couldn't find answers, there was only one way to go, and it was inward, right? So they gave me hope, they gave me advice, they I remember being in tears, just being spoken to so lovingly by my spirit team and my guides, and thinking like I was uncomfortable with it. I was like, you guys are always praising me, you're always like talking positively, you're always seeing the best in, they still call me out, they still give me some harsh truths, they still teach me, but it's all so loving. And I remember being in tears about it and realizing like spirit taught me love, Spirit taught me communication and compassion and clarity and healing. Spirit did that for me because the world did not, the world didn't. So it was that faith and that draw and that anchor. I think my ability to trust that, I should say, even that allowed me to have some type of hope.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful what can happen when we allow spirit in and we start to listen for the guidance. We follow the guidance.
It takes courage to follow the guidance. So
It
there's
takes a lot of
courage.
courage.
There are plenty of us, like I said, everybody's gifted. Everybody has that voice and that consciousness and that
Exactly.
guide. But
Yes,
it takes great courage to say, I'm gonna trust that, right?
I love.
And in like, so Spirit says this to me all the time, and I think it's powerful, is that pain is inevitable in the human experience because it's an emotion, it's a feeling, and it's inevitable. We'll trip, we'll fall, we'll get hurt. Even working out hurts sometimes. So pain is inevitable, but suffering is the choice. And a
Right.
lot of humans choose suffering because healing seems too hard, or the answer seems too hard, or they don't know how to find it, or they can't, or they keep struggling and looping or repeating the same patterns, or moving in the world in a very unaware way, right? Not considering their pattern, their behavior, their trauma, their wounds, and
Or how they
correct.
impact others.
Right. Or even how others impact them. They never really question that. They're moving in automated kind of flow and causing themselves a lot of unnecessary suffering. Nobody's
Yeah.
trying to punish you. Spirit isn't punishing you.
Yeah.
It's your inability to kind of shatter that pattern and seek something else. So I remember that all the time, and I continue reminding myself, like, nobody's suffering, nobody's punishing me, right? There's an answer, and if I'm curious enough, I'm gonna find it.
Beautiful. I love that. If I'm curious enough, I'll find the answer. So, Jessenia, your gifts phenomenal to listen to them. It's transforming just to look at you and see who you are now and imagine this phenomenal, from black to white, from zero to infinity transformation. So inspiring. And I um, know that you bring so much support and help for people who need a guide to help them to start to build this capacity to hear their own guidance, to follow spirit, and this whole process, right? So, why don't you tell people about how they can get a hold of you and anything else you want to say?
Well, I'm on social media as Soul Architect Jessenia, and all of my social media platforms have my website linked to them, which makes it easy to access. And I do have so my website is soularchitectjessenia.com. So same name all around.
Soul
And
architect or architecture?
architect.
Soul architect Jessenia.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have a subscription platform. So I don't work with a lot of people one-on-one. That's referral only, but I do have a subscription platform where we do shadow work, self-guided exercises to repair and reclaim yourself through this. And there's a big, beautiful community to support us through it. So I give the assignments out to people and follow through and check in with everyone. And then I have a live Zoom twice a month where I teach a spiritual subject and then we go into live questions. Yesterday we had one and it was just general spiritual development. So it was client led. They got to ask questions we were talking about archetypes, life planning, hauntings, clearing them, gift work, gift practice. So it was a lot of fun. And so that's the twice monthly Zoom coaching. And then my class, I do have a class. I love teaching. I think it's super important. We are definitely in a very pivotal evolutionary time. We're trying to bring our gifts to earth and be both expressions of this third dimensional reality and the fifth dimensional gifts and self and soul, and combine that. So I teach people how to understand that and use that, and then self heal through my class. So I love that. I think the class is really the best option because with the class you get to join the Zooms and the group and the Discord. So
Beautiful.
it's that's what I'm
All that's described on your website, I think.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Soularchitectjessenia.com.
Mhm.
Very lovely. All right. Well, I think you've just given us so much inspiration around the beauty and power of working through trauma, working through the challenges, how it can open your heart, how your children have been teachers for you, and your heart has opened, how spirit has guided you, and how the courage that you need to have courage at every step, pretty much to break the chains of your ancestral sort of inheritance, like the things that,
Wisdom,
yeah,
wisdom
systems.
only stays wisdom without action, right? It's the action that causes the transformation. You got to stay
Beautiful,
in motion.
very beautiful. So, okay, everybody, I hope that you're just so incredibly amazed, inspired, and supercharged to go into loving action around overcoming your adversity. And thank you for joining us. I'll see you. And thank you, Jessenia, so much for your kindness and your beauty and your wisdom and your amazing speaker. I can imagine your students just love listening to you. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode of Awakening to, I'm sorry, from Adversity to Awakening. And let's see, one more thing is I will be giving a workshop during that I don't even know when it is. I don't have the dates right here, but I'm doing a workshop on from resiliency, more resiliency for more joy. And it'll be free, and I'll be giving some of my best tips for building the resiliency that you need to sort of get this courage to take the action to be the wise and loving person that you always knew you are. Okay, so see you next time, everybody. So long for now.